At a time when most Royal Air Force 4-engine bombers were twin-engine designs, the short Stirling was designed from the outset as a 4-engined heavy bomber. As a result, it became the cornerstone of British heavy bomber groups from January 1941, predating all subsequent 4-engine bombers. The short Stirling was born from an RAF requirement outlined in the mid-1930s, calling for a heavy bomber that could conquer long-range missions and pack a powerful punch. With twice the power, the Stirling was quick to outshine several other types. The bomber proved to be a fantastic warbird that was of excellent service to the RAF as the first of its kind. However, it should have been much more. As author Murray Peden put it, but for its needless maiming at birth by the short-sighted planners who conjured up the Air Ministry specifications, the Stirling might well have outperformed even the great Lancaster. Two times two. In the 1930s, the Royal Air Force was all about twin-engine bombers, although it wasn't because they were particularly efficient. In truth, they had to put limited demands on engine production and maintenance, which were already stretched thin due to the introduction of many new types. Unfortunately, the power limitations of these aircraft were so severe that the British had to invest in developing big engines in the 2,000 horsepower range just to improve performance. However, after World War II broke out, none of these new engines were ready for production. Meanwhile, the United States and the Soviet Union were making strides in developing bombers powered by 4 smaller engines. These arrangements possessed favorable characteristics such as excellent range and adequate lift capacity. Seeing the success of these projects, in 1936, the RAF decided to research the feasibility of the 4-engine bomber as well. That year, the Air Ministry of the United Kingdom issued a set of requirements for a new type of bomber aircraft. The goal was to design and build an aircraft that could fly at high speeds over long distances, carry a significant bomb load, and be constructed quickly. The specifications called for a maximum bomb load of 14,000 pounds to be carried over a range of 2,000 miles. The bomber must have 4 engines and a crew of 6. It also had to carry 3 gun turrets for defense, located in the nose, midship, and rear positions. In addition to its bombing role, the type should serve as a troop transport for up to 24 soldiers. It also had to be able to take off from short runways and clear obstacles like tall trees at the end of the runway. However, such stringent requirements were not without consequences. Strict measures. Specification B-1236 was sent out to several prominent aircraft manufacturers like Supermarine, Boulton Paul, Handley Page, and Armstrong Whitworth, with the notable exception of Short Brothers. Yet, showing ample experience with similar designs and having exceptional production capabilities, they were eventually asked to participate. In response, Short proposed the S-29, based on their existing S-25 Sunderland flying boat, with the lower deck and boat hull removed. The design resembled a Sunderland, modified to meet the specifications of the Air Ministry. When the designs were reviewed, the Supermarine Type 317 was initially selected for prototype development. Regardless, Short was asked to build an alternative as insurance. The Air Ministry suggested modifications to the S-29 design, including using a different engine, increasing the service ceiling, and reducing the wingspan. Despite the significant redesign work, Short accepted the modifications and was asked to build 2 prototypes. The original design used the Sunderland's 114-foot wing, but had to be reduced to less than 100 feet. To compensate for the shorter wingspan, the wing was thickened and reshaped to provide the necessary lift and support for the excess weight. Still, the reason why the wingspan was so limited remains unclear. Some sources claim that it was to ensure the aircraft would fit into existing hangars, but this is not entirely accurate. In fact, the maximum hangar opening was 112 feet, and the specification required outdoor servicing. Some others argue that it was a method of keeping aircraft from being too large. Nevertheless, the limit was imposed by the Air Ministry and had to be adhered to, even if that meant the aircraft was doomed to fail. A nose-up profile. A twist of fate intervened in the design of the S-29 when the designer of the Supermarine Type 317 unexpectedly passed away. With doubts about Supermarine's ability to deliver on the project, Short's S-29 gained added importance. By mid-1937, S-29 was accepted as the second string for Type 317 and formally ordered towards the end of the year. A half-size prototype was flying by 1938, and the full-size one was delivered for testing in 1939. Hence, the short Stirling was the first of the 4-engine bombers to fly. Not only that, but the type was also the largest of the British-built heavy bombers of the war, with a towering height of 23 feet and no less than 6,600 horsepower provided by the Bristol Hercules radial engines. The Stirling bomber had a conventional look, with a forward-set flight deck, centralized bomb bay, and tricycle undercarriage. The wings were straight and low-mounted, with each assembly managing 2 leading-edge engine nacelles. The bomber was powered by 4 engines, each driving a 3-bladed propeller. The undercarriage was retractable, though the main legs were left tall, giving the bomber a noticeable nose-up profile. Also traditional was the tail section, with a single vertical tail fin flanked by 2 low-mounted horizontal planes. It required a crew of 7, including 2 pilots, a navigator bombardier, a nose gunner, a flight engineer, and 2 dedicated gunners. Defensive armament included 8 7.7mm machine guns, 2 in a powered nose turret, 2 in a powered dorsal turret, and 4 in a powered tail turret. Despite its size, the bomber was reasonably nimble. For easier assembly, it would be designed in sections that could be transported by train. The prototype took to the air shortly before the outbreak of World War II. Unfortunately, its undercarriage collapsed on landing, and the aircraft would not engage the enemy until 1941. The definitive Stirling. When first introduced, the Stirling saw the darkest days of the war and became a morale-building symbol for Britain and the country's growing aerial might. However symbolic, the bomber was still a formidable offensive weapon. Produced in 1940, the type entered operational service in its original Mark I form, available during the critical years of the war. Outstandingly, the Stirling had the crucial advantage that it could reach the German capital, should the situation demand it. Then followed the Mark II in prototype form, fitted with 4 Wright Cyclone engines, although the variant never saw production. Instead, the definitive variant became the Mark III, equipped with more powerful Bristol Hercules 16s. It was later consolidated as the principal bomber variant of the Stirling series. One of the most significant upgrades to the Stirling bomber was the addition of specialized Pathfinder equipment. This enhancement transformed the plane into an essential asset for airborne paratrooper operations, directing follow-up bomber formations to their targets, even in low-light conditions. Still, by 1944, the Stirling had seen its best fighting days, with the odds now turning in favor of the Allies. After victories in Africa, the Pacific, France, and Italy, and the Eastern Front, the Stirling was passed up in favor of more modern additions. Through the last months of the war, the bomber was relegated to secondary duties, operating as a glider or transport tug in its Mark IV version. Removed from bombing operations, it would take to mine-laying, electronic countermeasures, and agent and supply drops over Europe. Last but not least, the final variant of the short Stirling emerged, the dedicated transport model Mark V. The type was fielded across 28 total RAF bomber squadrons, and even with the arrival of more iconic warbirds like the beloved Avro Lancaster, the Stirling most definitely left its mark on aviation history. Second to none. The short Stirling was tragically limited from the start. Engineers at Short faced a daunting restriction that resulted in poor high-altitude performance and a low ceiling. However, at low altitudes, it was the fastest of the heavy bombers. In general, pilot accounts maintain that Stirling was a delight to fly and surprisingly maneuverable for such a large aircraft with a remarkable lack of vices. In the words of aviation author Jeffrey Norris, the Stirling was, quote, more maneuverable and responsive than any other aircraft in its class. Sadly, its time in main force operations began to decline due to losses on raids to Nuremberg and Berlin. A Bomber Command study revealed that between 10 and 15% of the Stirlings committed were lost, a much higher rate than other bombers. Despite its limitations, the short Stirling found new life after the war. A British company briefly used a few Mark V's as passenger aircraft between England and the continent. It was also used by Belgium, Egypt, and Germany, the latter only in a limited capacity by a specialist Luftwaffe air group. In total, 2,383 short Stirlings were produced. As acclaimed author Murray Peden put it in his book A Thousand Shall Fall, quote, she assuredly was second to none as a sturdy and dependable battler. The short Stirling earned the highest honors and never received them, except from every pilot she ever bore aloft. Thank you for watching our video. If you're interested in more captivating stories about the aircraft that shaped history and other military technologies, be sure to subscribe to Dark Skies and check out the rest of our Dark Documentaries channels. And to stay updated on our latest releases, turn on the notification bell. We publish regularly, so you don't want to miss out.